Part 1, The Frozen Confrontation. The Icy Standoff. The bitter wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Nixera, carrying with it shards of ice that glittered like diamonds under the pale light of the planet's twin moons. Commander Yarrick Voss stood firm, his advanced battle armor shielding him from the sub-zero temperatures. Through his helmet's enhanced vision, he studied the imposing figure before him, Princess Lyra Solon of the Stellar Dominion, her lavender skin glowing faintly against the stark white landscape. At her side loomed Frostclaw, a massive war beast with crystalline fur and eyes that burned like blue fire. "Why aren't you trembling, human?" Lyra's voice carried both authority and curiosity. "One word from me, and Frostclaw will devour you." Yarrick allowed himself a slight smirk, though she couldn't see it behind his visor. "Maybe I just don't scare easily, Your Highness." Her eyes narrowed at his use of the title. "You know who I am?" "Princess Lyra Solon of the Stellar Dominion," Yarrick replied casually. "Hard to miss the royal insignia on your armor. Though I have to say, you're a long way from your throne." Lyra dismounted Frostclaw with fluid grace, her movements almost hypnotic as she approached him. The beast remained perfectly still, its gleaming fangs bared in silent threat. "Clever human," she purred, circling him like a predator. "But knowledge won't save you. This world belongs to the Dominion now. Your presence here is unauthorized." Yarrick tracked her movements, maintaining his relaxed posture. "Funny thing about humans. We tend to go where we want, authorized or not." "Such arrogance," Lyra said, stopping directly in front of him. "Most species know better than to challenge the Dominion. Yet here you stand, alone, facing both me and my war beast without a trace of fear." "Maybe I'm just enjoying the view," Yarrick replied with deliberate insolence. A flash of surprise, perhaps even amusement, crossed her exotic features. "You dare to flirt with me while staring death in the face? Would you prefer I beg for mercy?" Yarrick countered. "It would be more appropriate." Lyra's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Perhaps. Though perhaps less interesting. The game of defiance." The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Yarrick could smell her exotic scent, something like winter flowers and ozone. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but something told him that simple submission would earn him a quick death. Defiance, on the other hand, might just keep him alive long enough to turn the tables. "Tell me, brave human," Lyra said, reaching up to tap his visor with one elegant finger. "What brings you to my frozen world? Surely not just to trade barbs with its princess." Yarrick caught her wrist before she could withdraw it, a bold move, given how Frostclaw growled and took a menacing step forward. But Lyra herself didn't pull away. Instead, her amber eyes widened slightly, and that dangerous smile grew broader. "Would you believe I'm here for the weather?" Yarrick asked. "I would not," Lyra replied. "Remove your helmet. If we're to continue this discussion, I wish to see your face." Yarrick hesitated. Removing his helmet would expose him to the bitter cold and, more importantly, leave him vulnerable. But sometimes, the greatest risk offered the greatest reward. With his free hand, he reached up and disengaged the seals. The bitter wind bit his face as he removed the helmet, but he kept his eyes locked on hers. Lyra studied his features with undisguised interest. "Handsome, for a human," she mused. "And those eyes, they remind me of the frozen lakes of my home world. So deep, so unyielding. You should see them in better lighting," Yarrick said. "Over dinner, perhaps." Lyra's laughter was like crystal chimes in the wind. "You continue to surprise me, human. Most would be begging for their lives by now." "Yarrick," he said. "My name is Yarrick Voss." "Yarrick Voss," Lyra repeated, testing the name. "You do realize I could have Frostclaw end you with a single command?" "You could," Yarrick agreed. "But then you'd never find out why I'm really here." And something tells me you're curious. Part 2, The Dominion's Secret. The Crystalline Fortress. The Dominion base rose from the frozen landscape like a dark crystal, its angular surfaces absorbing what little light filtered through the perpetual storm. Yarrick followed Lyra through massive doors that parted silently, revealing an interior that managed to be both austere and decadent, typical Dominion architecture. The temperature shift was immediate and dramatic. While his armor had protected him from the worst of the cold, the warmth inside the base felt almost tropical by comparison. Frostclaw padded off to what appeared to be a specialized habitat area, leaving Yarrick alone with the princess. "Your armor," Lyra said, gesturing to a nearby alcove. "You may store it there." Yarrick raised an eyebrow behind his visor. "Expecting me to disarm myself so quickly, princess?" She laughed, the sound echoing off the crystalline walls. "If I wanted you dead, Yarrick Voss, you would never have made it inside." Her fingers worked at the clasps of her own armor, removing pieces with practiced efficiency. "Besides, I prefer to look my guest in the eye when I interrogate them." The underlying threat was clear, but so was the playful glint in her amber eyes. Yarrick made a show of considering before beginning to remove his own armor. Beneath it, he wore a close-fitting black bodysuit, similar to what he glimpsed under Lyra's armor. Her appreciative gaze as he stripped down to the bodysuit was anything but subtle. My, she purred. "Perhaps humans aren't as physically inferior as our scientists claim." "Happy to help advance your research," Yarrick replied, noting how her own bodysuit left little to the imagination. The lavender skin beneath had an almost luminescent quality that drew the eye to every curve. The arrival of opposition. "Princess Lyra," a sharp voice cut through their exchange. "What is the meaning of this?" 3 Dominion nobles strode into the chamber, their ornate armor marking them as high-ranking military officers. The one who had spoken, a male with deep blue skin and ceremonial scars across his face, looked at Yarrick with undisguised contempt. "General Kale Drax," Lyra acknowledged coolly. "I wasn't aware you were monitoring the entrance protocols. When unauthorized aliens enter a classified Dominion facility, it becomes my concern," Kale snapped, his hand resting on an elaborate weapon at his hip. "Especially when said alien is human. Are you questioning my judgment, General?" Lyra's voice carried a dangerous edge that made even the battle-hardened officers tense. "With respect, Your Highness," another officer, this one female with scaled skin, interjected, "the human's presence here compromises security." "The project is my project," Lyra cut her off. "Or have you forgotten whose research made it possible?" Yarrick watched the exchange with keen interest. Whatever project they were discussing, it was clearly significant enough to have multiple high-ranking Dominion officials on edge. He filed away every detail, every reaction, for later analysis. "The human should be eliminated," Kale insisted. "Or at the very least, imprisoned for questioning." "He is my prisoner," Lyra said smoothly. "And I will question him personally." The general's eyes narrowed. "Your recent fascination with human culture is concerning, Princess. Some might question where your loyalties lie." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Lyra stepped forward, her presence suddenly overwhelming despite her relative state of undress, or perhaps because of it. There was something terrifying about someone who could project such absolute authority while wearing so little. "Choose your next words carefully, General," she said softly. "They may be your last." The tension rises. The tension crackled like static electricity as Lyra and Kale faced each other. Yarrick maintained his relaxed posture, but his muscles were coiled and ready. If this turned violent, he needed to move fast. "Your father, the Emperor, would not approve of this irregularity," Kale pressed, though he took a subtle step backward. "My father isn't here," Lyra replied, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I am." And I find it fascinating that you seem more concerned with my human guest than with the project deadlines you've repeatedly failed to meet. Part 3, The Trials of Worth. The Private Chambers. Lyra's private chambers were a marvel of Dominion engineering and artistry. The walls shimmered with crystalline patterns that shifted and pulsed in time with their movements, creating an almost hypnotic effect. The air was warm and carried a faint, floral scent that Yarrick couldn't quite place. Lyra led him to a large, circular platform at the center of the room, its surface covered in soft, glowing fabric that seemed to ripple like water. Last chance to run, human, Lyra breathed against his lips. What happens next will change everything. Yarrick pulled her closer, feeling the energy crackling between them. I'm counting on it. What followed was unlike anything Yarrick had ever experienced. Their connection was electric, both literally and figuratively. Lyra's bioelectric field intertwined with his own, creating a feedback loop of pleasure and sensation that left them both gasping and glowing, quite literally in Lyra's case. Her lavender skin emanated pulses of light that matched their rhythm, casting the room in an otherworldly glow. Hours later, as they lay entwined on the glowing platform, Lyra traced patterns on his chest with a satisfied smile. You continue to surprise me, Yarrick Voss. Few species can match Dominion stamina. Humans are full of surprises, Yarrick replied, running his fingers through her silver hair. Though I have to admit, some of what you can do is beyond human capability. Lyra laughed softly. Perhaps that's why I find you so fascinating. You know you're outmatched, yet you rise to every challenge. Her amber eyes met his. Even now, in my bed, you're gathering intelligence, aren't you? Yarrick didn't deny it. There was no point, she'd already proven remarkably adept at reading him. Would you respect me if I wasn't? No, Lyra admitted, propping herself up on one elbow to study him. Just as I would respect myself if I wasn't using this intimacy to evaluate you. And how am I measuring up? Yarrick asked, trailing his fingers along her arm and watching the way her skin brightened at his touch. Impressively, Lyra said, her smile turning predatory again. Though I'm still deciding whether that makes you more valuable as an ally or more dangerous as a potential enemy. Why not both? Yarrick pulled her closer, enjoying the way her bioelectric field made his skin tingle where they touched. The best allies are often the ones who could be dangerous enemies. Lyra laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. You truly don't fear me, do you? Even knowing what I am, what I could do to you. I respect what you could do, Yarrick corrected. Fear would imply I think you're going to do it. The call to duty. Their moment was interrupted by a chime sounding through the chamber. Your Highness, a voice called through the communication system. General Kale requests your presence in the main laboratory. There's been an incident with the Matrix. Lyra's expression darkened. Of course there has. She rose gracefully, her bodysuit materializing around her as if summoned. Duty calls, it seems. Yarrick sat up, his own bodysuit responding to his mental command to reform. Want company? Lyra considered him for a moment, then smiled. Yes, actually. Let's see how our dear general handles that. As they prepared to leave her chambers, Lyra caught his arm. Remember, Yarrick Voss, you've seen a side of me few ever have. That makes you either very privileged or very vulnerable. Why not both? Yarrick replied with a grin. Her answering laugh echoed through the crystalline corridors as they made their way to what promised to be a very interesting confrontation. The main laboratory. The main laboratory was a cathedral of crystal and light, with towering matrices that pulsed with inner radiance. As Yarrick and Lyra entered, he immediately noticed the tension in the air. General Kale stood near the central control platform, his blue-skinned face carefully composed but his eyes blazing with barely concealed fury at Yarrick's presence. Your Highness, Kale bowed stiffly. I see you've brought your consultant. I have, Lyra replied coolly. Now, what's this incident that required my immediate attention? Kale gestured to a display showing complex energy patterns. The matrix is experiencing unexpected fluctuations. We believe it may be due to external interference. Yarrick studied the readouts, noting patterns that seemed oddly familiar. Those energy signatures, they're not random. Kale's head snapped toward him. You dare. Let him speak, Lyra commanded, her voice carrying that edge of absolute authority that made even the general fall silent. These patterns, Yarrick continued, stepping closer to the display, they're similar to Earth's quantum communication protocols. Someone's trying to hack your system. Impossible, Kale sneered. Human technology is primitive compared to. He's right, the scaled female officer from earlier interrupted, checking her own readings. The patterns match known human quantum signatures. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say, Yarrick? These attempts beginning shortly after your arrival. Part 4, The Quantum Revelation. The Emperor's Judgment. The Emperor's laughter echoed through the laboratory, a sound that carried both amusement and authority. He stepped further into the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. The Imperial Guards fanned out, securing the area while keeping their weapons trained on General Kale. Unlike some, the Emperor said, his gaze settling on Kale, who cloak their treachery in false loyalty. He gestured to his guards. Take him to the detention level. I'll deal with him personally later. As Kale was dragged away, still protesting, the Emperor approached Jarrek's position at the controls. You understand our quantum mechanics well enough to stabilize a cascade failure, he observed. Humans are quick studies. Especially when motivated by survival, Yarrick replied, making a final adjustment to the matrix. And is that all that motivates you? The Emperor asked, his gaze flicking between Yarrick and Lyra. Your presence here is no coincidence, I suspect. Father, Lyra stepped forward, Yarrick has proven himself. Peace, daughter, the Emperor raised a hand. I'm well aware of your activities these past hours. His lips twitched at their expressions. The Imperial Guard monitors all areas of the facility for security, of course. Yarrick felt heat rise in his face but maintained his composure. Then you know I could have sabotaged the project multiple times but chose to save it instead. Indeed, the Emperor studied him thoughtfully. Tell me, Yarrick Voss of Earth, what were your original orders regarding this facility? To investigate its purpose, Yarrick answered honestly. Earth's leadership is concerned about Dominion expansion. As they should be, the Emperor nodded. And now that you've seen our work here, what would you report back? Yarrick glanced at the crystal matrices, then at Lyra, whose amber eyes watched him intently. That the Dominion is developing technology that could either enslave humanity or help us reach the stars together. The Emperor's expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Perceptive. The crystalline matrices could indeed be weaponized, as Kale and his faction desired. But their true potential lies in revolutionizing interstellar travel. And you needed this frozen world because... Yarrick prompted. The cold stabilizes the quantum field, Lyra finished, moving to stand beside him. We're not building weapons, Yarrick. We're building gateways. The Emperor nodded. The Dominion has reached the limits of conventional space travel. These matrices, when properly tuned, could create a network of instantaneous transportation points across the galaxy. And Earth's location makes it a crucial nexus point, Yarrick deduced. That's why you've been studying us, Lyra added. Among other reasons. The Emperor's gaze settled on his daughter with knowing amusement. Though some have found humans fascinating for more personal qualities. Lyra lifted her chin defiantly. I make no apologies for my choices, father. Nor should you, the Emperor's expression softened. Your mother was considered an inappropriate choice too, you know. From a species deemed too primitive for Dominion nobility. This revelation caused a stir among the remaining staff. Lyra's eyes widened. You never told me. Some truths reveal themselves when the time is right, the Emperor said. He turned back to Yarrick. Which brings us to the present moment. What am I to do with you, Yarrick Voss? You possess knowledge that could be dangerous to the Dominion, or beneficial to both our peoples. Earth has its own quantum research, Yarrick countered. Combined with your crystalline technology, we could advance the project years ahead of schedule. An alliance, the Emperor raised an elegant eyebrow. A bold proposal from someone who infiltrated our facility as a spy. Better than continuing to waste resources watching each other with suspicion, Yarrick said. Besides, he glanced at Lyra with a hint of a smile, I think we've proven our species can work well together. The Emperor's laugh echoed through the laboratory. Indeed, you have. Very well, Yarrick Voss, I will consider your proposal for an alliance. But first, his eyes gleamed with mischief, there is the matter of your relationship with my daughter. The trials begin. Lyra stepped forward. Father, the Dominion has traditions, after all. Any who would court a royal must prove themselves worthy through trials of combat and wit, the Emperor continued. What kind of trials? Yarrick asked, his pulse quickening. Oh, nothing too severe, the Emperor said with a suspiciously casual tone. Just single combat with Frostclaw, a riddle contest with our high mystics, and perhaps a small quest to retrieve a sacred artifact from the ice caves. Father, Lyra protested, though Yarrick caught the amused glint in her eye. Unless, the Emperor added, you're trembling at the thought. Yarrick met Lyra's gaze, seeing the challenge and affection there. He thought of their first meeting, of her question about why he didn't tremble. His answer hadn't changed.